Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk and UK Astrologer. First up, before I start, I just want to say, if I haven't said before, but just to remind you that Skype has now gone clonk. They've discontinued it, and I think it was out in the world for about 20 years, but it doesn't exist anymore now. And I was using it to a considerable degree. That's how I did all of my readings with people, and I don't want to do it. I'm now using Zoom, which costs money, which is horrible because Skype was free. So let's get straight into this episode, and I'm going to be answering a listener's question. So the person that we're going to be talking to today has been listening to the podcast, and I'm going to call them Deidre. So Deidre, thank you very much for sending your details in and your question. So let me read the email discussions that we've had. So, absolutely love the podcast. It's been such a fantastic resource on my astrology journey. I had to write in as I listened to the last 2 episodes, and I have both elements that you discussed, a massive Cap Stellium and moon in the 11th. So I think that episode was definitely designed for her. Would love to answer any questions you have or any feedback or observations you have about my chart. Give me the date of birth, blah, blah, blah. So I emailed her back and I said, well, what particular question you've got? Because astrology is an enormous subject, and even your own birth chart is an equally enormous subject. So to be able to condense someone's birth chart into a 25-minute podcast is reasonably difficult. However, we are going to cover some of the points that she's asked. So she said, I'd love to get your perspective. Having now viewed my chart in equal house system, I noticed that my sun moves to the 7th from the 8th in Placidus, which I guess, along with my 7th house Cap Stellium, adds even more emphasis. How would you interpret this? And she also says, as a Cancer rising with a heavy Cap emphasis, I feel the constant push-pull between Cancer and Capricorn. Leaning into my Taurus moon in the 11th is very key for me. I'm an artist as well as working as at a fashion university, supporting students with their creative career is very important to me, and it's also very social and Venusian, being surrounded by textiles every day. Any other recommendations for someone like me with so many planets in Capricorn? I'd love to hear what you think. So I'll just put that to one side there so that I make sure, because I can waffle, as you know, because you've listened to all these episodes. I want to make sure that I'm staying with the questions that have been asked by Deidre. So I'm going to start with her chart. So hi Deidre, I'm going to start with your chart as I would construct it. And right at the offset, I just to say there's no such thing as right or wrong house systems. As I've said zillions of times before, house systems are a form of belief system because the houses themselves don't exist as a thing, okay? Planets exist, signs of the zodiac exist as a method of explaining something, and also astrology is a language, and languages can be interpreted and understood in lots of different ways. There's absolutely no right or wrong way of doing things, and there's certainly no right or wrong way of there probably is a right and wrong way of interpreting a chart if you've got a head-on that is not compassionate. I don't think anybody should interpret a birth chart if they're not compassionate. So houses don't exist, aren't real. What they do for us is allow us to explain in a more poetic way how the person is, how they tackle life, how they might find their place in the world and feel more comfortable with it. But I also want to add in, because I've been doing a lot of thinking in the last week, that astrology absolutely is a belief system. Astrology itself is a belief system. The methods that are used are inverted commas scientific, because, as you know, if you've ever studied our solar system, those planets do actually exist. So when I say it's a belief system, I'm not implying that it's the same as religion. The one advantage to astrology is that it isn't a religion, because 99.9% of religions have been started by a bloke. One person started that religion, everybody else then follows in their path, and if you're not lucky, worship the person that started the religion and hold them in high regard and make them not be humanoids anymore. Whilst astrology can't be pinpointed down to one person. So you'll never get to the space where there was Mr. somebody or other in Babylonia saying, oh, I've got a great idea, let's do this. So luckily, within astrology, we don't have the necessity to worship. And I'm not so sure that I like the word worship. I mean, the official dictionary definition of worship is homage or service paid to a deity, acts, rites or ceremonies of this, adoration or devotion. Now, coming from a Catholic background and not agreeing with an awful lot of what Catholicism is all about, astrology for me fills the gap that was left when I decided that I definitely did not want to identify as being a Catholic. Unfortunately, though, if you've been baptised, it's a bit difficult to sort of get unbaptised. I haven't done a ritual, maybe I will one day. Anyway, astrology is, to my mind, is a belief system. However, it utilises science, inverted commas, and real living things, and it's a language, and it helps us understand ourselves and others and situations, etc., because it recognises that us as little human beings just wandering around on Earth, we're not the only beings. There is a solar system of which we are part of. So do astrologers worship planets? I don't know. I don't think we're going to get into that discussion today. But anyway, it's just considering where the person, so where Deidre, where you come from, that I just thought I'd add that a bit in there. I was just, because I spent quite an amount of time getting to this episode and considering everything from lots of different points of view. So we're going to start with Deidre's chart using the equal house system, remembering, of course, that it doesn't matter what house system you use. You, as the astrologer, trainee, learner, student, however you want to call yourself, interested in, maybe you are already a professional astrologer, that it's useful or better to have a good knowledge of a house system so you can look at a chart more quickly, so that then you can help people more easily. And I prefer the equal house system. I doubt I'm going to change much about it. However, if you want to know more about house systems, then you need to check out episode 336, where I'm interviewing a guy called Rhys Chatham. So it's R-H-Y-S, Chatham, C-H-A-T-H-A-M. He has got a couple of YouTube videos. Because it's an interview, there's also a YouTube video of him. And he's going to be coming to give a talk to the Astrological Association this year. And he uses more than one house system. If I remember rightly, I'm 99% sure he's a Virgo, but don't quote me. But the thing about house systems is he uses different house systems for different consultations, for different questions, or for different things. Me, I use the equal house system all the time because the majority of my clients are coming with relationship issues. So that's 99.9%. Not every client, so maybe it's not 99%, but a large percentage of my clients that I work with have some sort of either a relationship issue or career issue, or want to know about themselves, and using other house systems for me doesn't work. But anyway, keeping in mind that you can do mundane astrology, which our lovely Rod Chang does, and he uses different house systems depending on what he's getting up to. So back to Deidre's chart. Cancer ascendant. Chiron is conjunct the ascendant at 11 degrees, and the ascendant is 14 degrees into Cancer. In equal house, we'll talk about that. Okay, so with the ascendant being 14 degrees and 58 minutes, the sun is only just into the 7th house, because Deidre's sun sign is 14 degrees Aquarius, 29 minutes and 50 seconds. So if you round that up, which Astrodot has done, it's 14 degrees and 30 minutes, and her ascendant is 14 degrees 58, 14 degrees 58. Her sun is right at the very, very end of her 7th house. Now, there are plenty of astrologers, and even Astro.com does that if you've got your sun sign, I can't remember how many degrees it is past the centre of the chart, centre of the house, but they say things like, they do that with mine, because I've got a 15, I think mine's 15 degrees Pisces, but my ascendant is a very late degree in Leo, that my sun sign's it's further towards the end of my 7th house than at the beginning. And so when your sun sign is near to or abutting to the house line, would you believe, Astro.com will give the interpretation for the next house. And that absolutely drives me crazy, because I sort of think, if we're going to do house systems and we're saying that this is the numbers, and it's a numbers thing, so I'm quite happy with that, numbers. And then if we're saying, oh, well, because it's near a line and it's nearly to the end of that line, we'll just skip it into the next house. Why would you do that? Why does anybody do that? So Deidre, as far as I'm concerned, you have your sun sign in the 7th, and the only way to know whether or not that is how it is for you is to ask yourself, how many close personal relationships have you had since you were born? So they might not all be romantic, they might be even platonic, is that the right word? But how many relationships have you had, or have you wanted to have, or have you been aware of? I talk about myself now. I've got sun in the 7th. I started to date quite early, or even think about blokes when I was about 13. I didn't actually go out with anybody, but I'd start getting crushes on people and stuff. And I was 16, 17 when I had my first official boyfriend. I think I'd just turned 17. I know I wasn't 18. But yeah, I was very interested in relationships. So that's a question you have to ask yourself. If your sun sign turns up in the 7th, does it feel like that relationships as a thing is important for me? It doesn't have to be interested in the opposite sex. That doesn't always compute. But it is about relationships, feeling better in one than out of one. Or maybe sometimes people get to the stage where they haven't had a relationship, and they're whatever age they are, they start to panic. Anyway, sun in the 7th is about relationships. Now, if we're saying it's not just about relationships, what else can the sun in the 7th be about? It can be about working one-on-one with other people. And you've mentioned in your email that you are supporting students with their creative career, and that you're surrounded by textiles every day. So you're going to be a reasonably sociable person. I think it's tricky to work in a university and be isolated. So the sociability factor I would put down to the sun being an Aquarius. It's very much, we'll talk about your Mercury in a second, but the sun in Aquarius very much wants to connect with friends. Friendship is more important for an Aquarius than love. So I'm sure I could conjure up, if I wanted to, zillions of charts with people with the sun in Aquarius in the 7th and never married. And they weren't interested in relationships, but they would definitely, every Aquarius is interested in friendships. I know because I have 2 sisters that are Aquarius. My mother was an Aquarius, my auntie was an Aquarius, and my ex-mother-in-law, who is still alive, are, I'm not doing the past or the present tense. Let's just say they're all Aquarius. Okay, so the sun signs are all Aquarius. Friendships, super, super important. Now, let's move on. It's interesting that you've written in your email, I'd love to get your perspective on the heavy Cap emphasis is the constant push-pull between Cancer and Capricorn, because the ascendant is Cancer and there is a cluster of planets in Capricorn. So we've got Mercury 19 degrees Capricorn, Venus 21 degrees Capricorn, Mars 3 degrees Capricorn, Saturn 19 degrees Capricorn, Uranus 7 degrees Capricorn, Neptune 13 degrees Capricorn. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets in Capricorn. That's definitely 100% a stellium. Venus is retrograde, so watch out for that. It's in your 7th house. It's happy there. Venus is rulership, house rulers and whatever. Venus is happy there because the 7th house is equivalent to the 7th sign, which is Libra. 7th is all about relationships. Obviously, Venus is a ruler to that house, not that sign. With it being retrograde, there will be issues where you might date someone, dump them, and then get back with them again. So there'll be the re-experiencing of love. Anytime we stick in front of a planet and something's retrograde, we're going to have to redo it. I've got Mercury retrograde. If you want me to learn something, I'm going to have to repeat it a million times. And you also have Jupiter retrograde. However, that's hidden in your 7th house, forms quite a lot of oppositions. Jupiter's opposition Mars, Jupiter's opposition Uranus. Is that the 2? Just the 2. Mars and Uranus. Because Mars and Uranus are conjunct. Oh, what a busy chart you've got. Jupiter is an old ruler to the 12th. You think of Pisces. In the old rulerships, Jupiter was the ruler to the sign Pisces. The modern one's Neptune. And again, with it being retrograde and with it being enclosed in the 12th house, which is the house of secrets and stuff, you might find believing in yourself a little bit more difficult. So Jupiter's what we believe in and where our beliefs lie. And that's a point, if you're ever counselling somebody with a religious or faith-based issue that they've come with, that happens a lot. Check out their Jupiter, the sign it's in, the location and stuff. Anyway, we're not doing that today. Now, Denise, your sun sign only makes one major aspect. I would say that was the most important part of your chart. Your sun is square to Pluto. So your sun's 14 degrees and your Pluto's 17. It's within orb. So be aware of the sun represents dad and Pluto's about deep change and transformation. There could be issues to do with your father, whoever your father is, or how things go with dad. But when we've got a strong aspect from they call them the luminaries or the lights, which is the sun and the moon. If there's a strong square or a conjunction or an opposition between the sun and the moon and Pluto, there's going to be something that needs to be transformed. So it's your perception of your father. Your father might actually have been absolutely awful or wonderful, whichever it is, but that's something that needs to be reconciled in some way. Now the stellium, because it borders 2 houses, the 6th and the 7th, and we've got a lot of Capricorn energy, the key word for Capricorn in a way is seriousness, things that need to be taken seriously or are serious. Yeah. So we've got 3 in the 6th, which is health and routine, and 3 of those little babies in the 7th, which is close personal relationships, etc. And if we just take them as a stellium on their own, as a busy flipping stellium, the key word to that is serious. But then you need to add in the keywords for the planets. Now, I'm not going to read those out to you. I'm going to send you back to my website if you haven't been there already. So let me give you the link, because you need to get those keywords, you need to write them down, you need to put them outside your chart. And in doing so, what happens is you can make a little sentence about everything in your chart. So you need to go to maryenglish.com/keywords, spelt with a capital K, KEYWORDS .txt, and the TXT are small letters. I've put this permanently on my website, so anybody can go and get it. If you want to download it, just right click it and download it. It'll download as a text document. It doesn't matter what what computer system you use, you'll be able to download it. And I recommend, because I'm not doing this for you, you have to do this yourself. This podcast isn't here to do stuff for you, it's to give you encouragement so that you can do these things yourself. Because I don't know about you, but I much prefer doing stuff myself rather than having people do it for me. But hey, maybe that's just me. But the push and the pull that you're talking about is that you're going from Cancer, which is family and mummy and daddy and cuddles and all the rest of it, and Saturn, which is about seriousness and ambition and climbing to the top of whatever it is that you're at. But that isn't who you are. Be very, very careful about putting too much emphasis on that Capricorn stellium. It isn't who you are. It never is who you are. Who you are is your sun sign, and you're a sun sign Aquarius. So my Aquarius book is How to Bond with an Aquarius. Now, it's my second book that I wrote, because the first one was How to Survive a Pisces, because I basically wrote it so my husband could understand me. Present husband, that is, not previous. I'd already divorced him. But the second one, because when I submitted my book proposal to the publisher, he said yes. He said, I love the book, I think it's marvellous. Didn't say that, but that's a succinct summary of what happened. He wanted the book, he said, but he didn't just want one book off me. So I thought, oh well, there we go, I'll have to do one for each sign of the zodiac. I hadn't even planned on doing that, and I thought, well, since I started Pisces, I can't suddenly go to Aries, I'll have to go backwards. So would you believe, and I've got Mercury retrograde, well, you will believe this because I've got Mercury retrograde, I wrote the series of books backwards. So I started with Pisces, and then I did Aquarius, and then Capricorn, and so on, all the way back through the zodiac. And the last book I wrote was the Aries one. So it isn't often when people do astrological stuff. So many astrologers always start at Aries. And I get a bit tired of that, which is why when I do my newsletter, which comes out every month, I start the newsletter with the sign of the zodiac that's predominant for that month. So, for instance, I've done the May one, and I'm saying happy birthday to Taurians. Because when I used to do a radio show as well, same thing, I'd do start with the sign of the zodiac that was current for the episode that I'd been invited on to. And one of the ladies that I used to, she ran a Spanish radio station, and she was a Leo, and she said she always waited because I'd be reading them out. She was waiting for me to do the Leo one, and she always waited and was really excited when it came to her birthday in August, because now she would be top of the list. And I remember telling her it was quite funny. But yeah, you've got to take into account your sun sign. It is Aquarius, and Aquarians want to connect. They might not want to connect with every Tom, Dick and Harry and everybody knocking about the place, but they want to feel some sort of connection with people that will spark ideas for them, that will give them the ability to discuss things like life, the universe and everything. So they're not an excitable sign, because it depends what other planets they've got, but they certainly are more absorbed with the bigger picture, because we can say that, like, the teeny weeny picture is going to be Virgo. Virgo is going to go right down to the nth detail of things. You know, if you're with a Virgo and they see a teeny little spot, something's white, okay, if you want to torment a Virgo, do some painting on a wall somewhere and then put a teeny weeny little black spot in it, in some random place, and I can guarantee you they'll go over and they'll go, oh, what's that? What's that bit that's added on there? Or if you're doing painting, I've come across this, so I'm giving these examples. If you're painting and you're painting for a Virgo, my younger sister is a painter and decorator and she is an Aquarius, and you miss a bit, okay, so you've done a whole room and there's a teeny weeny bit where your paintbrush didn't quite cover whatever it was you were supposed to be covering. They'd hone in on that. You missed a bit. Virgos are going to find it a little bit more tricky to look at the bigger picture. But Aquarius is very much into that bigger picture. You know, why does humanity do this? There's quite a lot of whys. The signs of the zodiac that more ask why when they're little are definitely air signs. Yeah. So what's the recommendations for someone with so many planets in Capricorn? Personally, I'd say don't even bother with them. Then they're not going to change the direction of your life. Having any stellium probably adds up the ante in the houses that they're in, so you definitely need to be health aware. You need to take physical exercise. You've got Mars in the 6th house, so you do need to run around the block or just something equivalent. You've got Mercury in the 7th and it's in Capricorn. You need to be able to talk with your partner or partners, or whichever way you swing. But the most important thing is the sun sign. So the recommendations was your question, what would I recommend? I'd just say enjoy the fact you've got those planets there. I mean, obviously read up what I've just said to you, the keywords for that, and then you can make little sentences and you can squish them all together. And remembering, of course, that you were born during an astrological configuration that doesn't happen every day of the week and only happens once every 170 years. And you're born during an indigo era. So you're born during the indigo era. You've not got a totally clustered chart, reasonably clustered. So listen to episode 21 and get more details. And you have got Moon and Jupiter in opposition on the other side of the chart, so that sort of makes you, like, if we're going to say percentages, possibly 80% indigo, if such a thing exists. But because you've got that stellium and it is in Capricorn signs, and it'll slow down your thinking because you're an Aquarius, but your thinking planets in Capricorn, you need to, but my only advice would be, if you're an air sign and your Mercury's in an earth sign, tell anybody, when they ask your opinion, say, I'll give it to you in a minute, and have a little think first, yeah, because otherwise you're going to regret what you might have said, because earth needs time to settle, it needs to literally come down to earth, yeah. Now, the difficulty of the sun being in the 7th and the 8th, well, according to Alois Trendle and Astro.com, he would have given you sun in the 8th anyway with his interpretations, even using the equal house system. And you have to then ask yourself, what does it feel like? Do you feel that your sun in the 8th, that you want privacy, that you're interested in other people's secrets, but you're never going to reveal your own? Are you interested in finance and long-term finance, so financial investments? Does the other side, however you want to classify it, does that really, really light your fire? So things like spiritualism or tarot or those sort of things, like you just can't live if you're not using those things. The 8th is sex, birth, death, reincarnation. You're going to be interested in those things. And even if you're not, because you're totally unreligious, and I think the word is secular, then you're going to never ever want anyone to pry. I gave birth to and I'm married to people that have Sun in the 8th. Do not pry. They'll tell you what they want to tell you, and that's it. And you can ask questions which they might evade, but don't ask a direct question to somebody with Sun in the 8th. Do a sort of a side shot. Poof, it goes past them, not boom, straight into the face, because they'll go, ooh, and they'll freeze, possibly. 8th house is the house of secrets. It's not the house of secrets, that's the 12th, but it is, I think I mentioned in the previous podcast, that the two houses that the most secretive is the 12th and the 8th. My mother had Moon in the 12th. She was never going to tell you how she felt. She gave birth to a Down syndrome child, came out of hospital, and my father said to my mother, don't break down. Like in the hospital when she just given birth, he said, wait till you get home. But she never broke down in front of us. She never broke down. Loads of things happened to her. She never broke down. She wasn't going to. Moon's in the 12th. Going to keep your feelings to yourself. So it's not, what do I think? Do I think you've got Sun in the 8th? Something I think, because of the way that I use house systems, you've got Sun in the 7th. But you have to ask yourself and read up on other people that have their sun signs in those places. Does that feel right for you? Because I know I'm not Sun in the 8th. Sorry. I don't care what house system you use. I'm not Sun in the 8th. I don't think I'd be chatting as much as this was. So I hope that's helped you a little bit with your chart. The Cancer ascendant is a very squishy ascendant sign to have for a sun sign Aquarius, and since your sun sign is the only planet that's in Aquarius, you might find that you don't really identify too much with your sun sign. And also because your sun sign squares to Pluto and Pluto's in Scorpio, you might not like the things that are supposedly attributed to the sign Aquarius, because there's plenty of, websites and books and people's opinions on different signs of the zodiac, some being better or worse than others. They're not. Everything is all part of the circle. But you don't have any other Aquarius planets, so it might be a little bit more difficult for you to feel like an Aquarius. So I definitely recommend you get my book, which is How to Bond with an Aquarius. Don't freak out. That word bond isn't to do with bondage. I needed a word that was going to encapsulate, because there's very short sentences for the titles of the books, the friendship element, because that is so important. And bonding is something that happens within friendships. And I used the word very reservedly and explained it zillions when I first wrote the book a number of years ago, that bonding's not about bondage. I'd use the word because friendship's so important for Aquarius. And when they're in a friendship, it's that bond that they feel between them and the friend. It's not a physical sort of heart-based feeling. It's a connection that is like a sort of electricity that connects them to that other person. When Aquarians lose their friends, there's no difference in losing their partners or their lovers or whatever, but when they lose a dear friend, they are bereft. Now, other signs of the zodiac don't grieve or mourn as much as an Aquarius will when they lose a friend, whoever they classify their friend as being. So you can quite easily, as an Aquarius, be married to somebody and also be their friend. But Aquarians grieve considerably when they've lost friends. Anyway, I'm repeating myself now and I'm telling you stuff you don't need to know. So I hope that's helped, Deirdre. Do ping me over an email if it doesn't, or if it does, or whatever you feel happiest doing. And next week I'm going to be covering Saturn in Aries, so it's something that's just coming up. I just want to add in, because obviously not everybody listens to the podcast exactly when it's broadcast, but I just want to point out that Mars is transiting through the sign of Leo at the moment, and it is a time of the year when Mars does that, when there are more likely to be fights and wars. Wars are slightly different, but more likely to be fights and disruptions and protests. Mars in Leo does bring protests. We had an episode in the UK a while back where some people went a bit sort of bonkers and went racing down the streets and setting things alight and stuff, and that was during a period when Mars was in Leo. So the more fire that we get with all the planets changing now into the signs of air and fire, those things are more likely to happen. Anyway, next week we're discussing Saturn in Aries. If you've got any questions on that, please will you ping them over to me so that I've got them all ready for next week's episode. So I hope you have a fab week, and I'll be back next week. Bye bye now.